The next area we look at is retirement planning, and this is the area that's, for most of my clients, is their biggest area of concern. Generally it's retirement planning and then education planning. That's what usually brings clients in to sit down with me. Although the other event that'll trigger people wanting to sit down with someone like myself is a major event financially in their lives. An inheritance, anticipating retirement, things like that. It's usually some major financial event. So when we talk about retirement, first thing they ask about retirement is, when do you want to retire? Everyone says, tomorrow. I don't, by the way. I like what I do. I want to do it forever. But when people want to retire has a major bearing. People want to take early retirement a lot of the time. The problem is that puts a lot of pressure on their assets to support them. They have less time to accumulate assets. They have less time for those assets to compound. And then on top of it, they're now asking those assets to support them for a longer period of time, theoretically. So that's where we have to also look at what's a life expectancy. You know, how long do we think we want to have this money be around to take care of us in retirement? Also, what does retirement actually look like? I mean, for some people, retirement is sitting on the porch on a rocking chair with their feet up. For other people, it's a second career. It's like, now I spent my time in corporate America. I'm done with all that. I want to go to the Amazon and do dental work with children. You know, things like that. You know, whatever your passion is, we want to find out what that is and see if there's a way to help you actually have that dream come true. What's going to be needed financially? Now, this is a very challenging area to predict because we don't know. We don't know exactly what inflation is going to be. We don't know what investment returns are going to be over time. Not really. We've got averages. We don't know how much people are going to be able to put away, how long it's going to be needed, etc., etc. So there's a lot of variables when we look at financial planning. So generally what I do is I run multiple scenarios, and I'll change one variable, such as the amount going in or the amount of return or things like that, to show the impact on accumulation. And then we'll come up with some number, some amount that should get put away on some regular basis on top of what may already be there. So once we know, at least loosely or roughly, how much we're going to need in retirement, we know how much to put away, we know how much we're starting with. Then the next question is, where should the money be put? You know, should we put it in IRAs? Well, IRAs are a great tool. The problem is, for those of us under 50, I think the maximum this year is $5,000, which is certainly a nice jump up from the old $2,000 limit, which we had for so many years. It's, you know, we got to do a lot more than that usually for most people to have the kind of retirement they want. 401ks, great tool for most people, especially if there's a company match. Put money in up to a certain limit, the company will match up to that limit. Big disadvantage of 401ks: the participant doesn't have any real say as to what the investment options are. And oftentimes the plan sponsors are constantly changing the investment options. And that's not a good thing to do with investments. You want to keep a solid plan. So we work with clients to help them work around those changes and how to incorporate those changes, which they can't control. And then, okay, if we can't use this fund, then what about this fund? What are the options? Those kinds of things. By the way, one of the other areas that's important in retirement planning are taxable accounts. Remember I spoke earlier about the tax bracket, the capital gains taxes versus ordinary income taxes? Well, don't underestimate the importance of having money in taxable accounts. If you retire at 65, for example, and you want to have a comfortable retirement, well, ideally we don't want to touch our IRAs or 401k rollovers simply because we don't have to until we're aged 70 and a half. You may at 59 and a half, you must at 70 and a half. Well, if we retire at 65, there's that 5.5 year window where it would be best to not touch the IRAs, the rollovers, so they can compound. They can compound more. The rule of 72, if an account's earning 10%, it'll double in value in 7.2 years. It's the rule of 72. It's a little tool to figure it out. So if we don't have to take money out right now, let's not. Well, how do we bridge the gap in the meantime? That's where the taxable account comes in. And oftentimes that taxable account is an important account to have during our earning years as a fallback if there's a sickness or an illness, as a source of funding for college, as a source of funding for emergencies such as a new furnace or new roof, things like that. So it's kind of a multi-purpose swing account. So they're important to have. Another question is, how and when do we want to start, quote, harvesting the assets during retirement? Like I said, do we want to start pulling on an IRA as soon as we retire? Not necessarily if we can avoid it. We want to use assets during retirement in ways that maximize their tax benefits and the cash flow to us and the compounding at the same time. So I talk about these different tiers or levels of accounts and when to use them in different times of life during retirement. There's a whole strategy around that. One of the last questions I'll ask clients in the area of retirement is, do you want to use it all up? Do you want to spend your kids' inheritance? Or do you want them to have an inheritance? You know, or perhaps a charitable bequest. And it's a very important question, because if you want to preserve your assets for your heirs or a charity, then we need to put more away to be able to support you during retirement and at the same time still have something at the end of the rainbow for others. So depending on cash flow, it ties back into all the other areas. Depending on what your cash flow is, we may or may not be able to do that. Or we may be able to hit somewhere in between. You know, support ourselves through retirement and still have some degree of asset for an inheritance.